All right, great. Seeing that it is 7 o'clock, I'll call this meeting of the Community and Economic Development Authority to order. The next item on our agenda is a roll call.
Garada Prada?
Yeah.
Clary's excused, absent with excuse. Hamilton?
Here, am I coming through? I'm on my iPad.
Yep, we can hear you, Mark.
Yep. Okay, here.
Okay. Hardy? Potts?
Here.
And Wheeler?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, great. The next item on our agenda is approval of minutes. We have the minutes from our August 26, 2021 meeting. Those were included in your packet.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion by Julia and a second by Mark. Is there any discussion of those minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Item number 4 is a meet and greet with our new city administrator, Chad Brecklin, who I believe is in the council chambers. You may or may not know, Chad was a longtime member of our police department and also had served as the police chief. But I will turn it over to him.
Thank you, Chair, Mr. Potts. I think I know just about everybody here, other than maybe, looks like Mr. Harrigan. I don't know if I've met you, and the gentleman just joining, I don't know if we're acquainted or not as well. But my name is Chad Brecklin. I began my role as city administrator in July, so would say I'm still getting settled in, without a doubt. Lots to learn, and I'm definitely looking forward to the challenge and the opportunity that this role presents. As Andy said, I've served the city for 22 years in its police department, most recently the last 3.5 years as its police chief. I want to thank everybody who is a member of this committee. Your service is important to our community, and we certainly appreciate the time and commitment you make to help run the city and provide some great guidance to us all. If there's anything that I can do to help and assist this group, by all means, feel free to reach out. My contact information is out on the city website. So thank you very much. Looking forward to working with you all.
Mute here. Were there any questions for Chad? I think this is certainly a case where I think his past experience might be beneficial to us. I think especially looking at things like healthy neighborhood and seeing how kind of the interrelation between things that CETA does and how they have a larger impact throughout the community. I kind of always remember Chad's predecessor when Tom Blotter was chief would always say that, you know, there's certain individuals the city will have contact with. It's just a matter of which department do we want to have contact them. So I think it's always important to remember that there's definitely a cross between what we do and really all the other departments. But if there are any questions or comments for Chad, certainly open up the floor. Okay.
Can I mention something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so no, thank you, Chad, for your words. And this is a very important committee, as Andy mentioned, because, you know, we are a community and economic development committee. So, and there are a lot of good projects that they are born in this committee, and then the city put forward, and it would be nice to have, you know, your support, especially with the Healthy Neighborhood Initiative and the Hub and all of these projects that they are coming in the pipeline.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Chad. Thanks for joining us early on a Thursday morning. Our next item is public appearances for non-agenda items. Mike Zimmerman, do we have anyone in the chamber, or has anyone submitted a request to speak?
No one in the chamber, no request to speak.
Okay, great, thank you. Item number 6 is resolutions and ordinances. The first item is 6A is resolution R-75-21, approving workforce housing endowment program feasibility study completed by H&A Advisors LLC for a rent-to-own townhome project.
And Mr. Chair, we have Mike Harrigan and Steve Affelbach. They're going to take us through their presentation and overview of the feasibility report.
Okay, great. I will turn it over to Mike or Steve, whoever wants to kick things off.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Wait. Do you have a second?
That's true. We should have a
second.
Second.
we need a motion and a second before we get going.
Well, I move forward.
I second.
Okay, now take it away.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, members, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Chad, Administrator Chad. You mentioned you didn't know me or Steve, but just by way of history and background, I did have a history with the city prior to this opportunity to serve, in that I was the city's financial advisor for a little over 20 years when I was with Ehlers and Associates. And during that time, we worked on many things related to the financial health of the community. This was a program that Steve and I started. Steve was the president of the company. I was the chairman. Steve started the idea, and we thought, as we had done work with many communities across the state, we learned that one of the high priorities, almost universally, is a need to address workforce housing. And so we developed a concept that we thought could provide an ongoing means of financing this type of an initiative for communities. And Fitchburg engaged us to assist in examining that idea further, specifically as could be applied in the city of Fitchburg. And so we've been working for about the past 9 months on this project with the Community and Economic Development Authority, the Housing Advisory Committee, the Plan Commission, and of course with the council's blessing. It sort of is coming to fruition today before the CDA with the final draft of the plan of the analysis and projections. And we had a meeting here with this body. I believe it was the 26th of August was our last meeting. And at that time, the committee was positive with regard to the overall report. There were a few things that the committee had asked us to specifically look at in relationship to some detail that they wanted further examined in the area of risk assessment and in the area of finalization of the detail on the public policy points to be considered. And so we have done that. I'm going to try and share my screen here so that we can kind of walk through some of the specific changes that occurred with the report itself. And I'll go through this, and as we have done in the past, Steve Affelbacher, my partner, and I will tag team with one another to go through and explain what has occurred in terms of any changes since your last examination and consideration of the report. In this, and you should have a full draft of this, you should have received this. This version has a red and green lining on it, which identifies the changes. I won't go through every single change. Some of them are just more grammatical or are now changing because of the date changes that occurred here, which is the case in this particular chart. But I am going to focus on the specific areas of the report where your input at the last meeting was specifically addressed in the report. And one of those areas is in this chart with the city benefits, and at the end of the day, what's the city getting out of this and what is the tenant getting out of it based upon your investment in the program. And Steve, I'm going to ask you to kind of walk the committee through this these couple of tables right here.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us. Just spending a couple minutes in regards to the city benefits, and by way of background, as you recall, when we were engaged, we hit the market at the worst time in terms of construction costs, and at the time we started to look at the numbers, we experienced a 30% increase in the construction costs from what we originally saw. And as you recall, we've used about $165 a square foot for construction costs, which was up 30% from what the initial numbers were that we saw just due to supply issues within that industry. With that, we know that there's a lot of other housing options out there that are probably cheaper because they've been constructed prior to that increase that's occurred. But I think it demonstrates the fact that costs are going up substantially, and there certainly is a need for workforce housing, and that if anything, the substantial increase at some point, once those units that have been constructed at lower costs are off the market, there's going to be even a worsening problem that's out there. And those are the numbers that we attempted to use within our report. As we mentioned before, we've tried to be conservative in the report and be realistic in the assumptions that we've made. We've tried then to display what we think would be the benefits for this. And the major benefit that we see is not only constructing a workforce housing project, but also the concept is that it's not one and done. That it's an endowment that's set up, and that whatever funds are put into the project by the city through the tax increment district will be ultimately returned to the district. And so based on the analysis that we've done and the construction costs, we're looking at those units being $3,700,000 in terms of a project which would be substantial, which ultimately would pay taxes within the city. During the life of the rent to own concept, they're paying a payment in lieu to the city. And then ultimately, when sold to the individual, they would pay their full property taxes, but that's a substantial value. And in turn, then those units would be sold to individuals. In addition to that, and we'll talk more because that was one of the questions of the committee, is where does the money come from? And we've developed a slide to address that we'll talk about in a minute. But the initial equity that's contributed by CETA through the TIF district, the $820,000, is envisioned to be paid back. In addition to that, an additional $100,000 that would be dollars that would be generated up and above the money that's been contributed by CETA, and all of that would be returned to the endowment program for once the unit had been sold, and there'd be varying schedules as to when the unit would be sold because it depends on our focus is on 80 to 100% of adjusted gross income. We've focused primarily in our discussion on the 80%ers, those that would take the longest to pay out, which would take, based on our current analysis, up to 10 years. But there would likely be a mix of 80 and 100%ers in the particular development that would occur. And as you note, the 100%ers would be at the end of 4 years in a position then to buy the unit. So there'll be varying times in which those dollars would come in, but ultimately within that 10-year period, we would envision then that $920,000 coming in. In addition to that, once the project and the development had been sold, all of the units had been sold, it frees up the debt reserve, which were from tax increment dollars, which is an additional $85,000. And based on the last discussion by CETA, the residual equity, and we'll talk about what that means and where that comes from, there could be an additional $765,000 if everybody were the 80%ers, or no dollars if everybody were 100%ers, but some additional dollars would also be coming back into the endowment fund to construct another project. In addition to that, what's been accomplished is a home value of $370,000. Now, this for the 80%er is in the 10th year in terms of the estimated value of that unit, assuming a 2% increase. Equity would be generated of the $74,000, which would be rolled into their financing at that time when they purchased the home. And more importantly, the city has accomplished the goal that workforce housing tenants have been paying 30% of no more than 30% of their income for housing, which would be created by this particular development. So that was an additional reformatting last time. Anything to add to that, Mike?
No, I think that covers what we did. We didn't really make changes to the basic numbers. We just reformatted this to make it hopefully more clear in response to some of the members of CEDA's inquiry about it. Moving on then, with regard to the policy issues that were open that needed to be addressed, you will recall we talked about these 4 policy areas. There's an appendix back in Exhibit 4 in the report that we'll get to in a bit. But effectively, there was a consensus reached by CEDA at the last meeting on each of these 4 points as to the direction to take, with one item being still subject to some further analysis, that one being the examination of the land lease covenant approach and the marrying of that potential concept. There were 2 members, Julia was one of those that wanted more examination of that point. And to that end, we have submitted an additional proposal as part of the work we'll be doing in the coming year to more thoroughly examine the feasibility of incorporating the land lease as an option for further consideration by the community. So we'll get to those points more specifically as we get back to those risk factors in the appendix, or as we get back to the policy issues in the appendix. On the risk factors, there were a couple of points that were specifically added directly as a result of the discussion at the last meeting of CEDA. And one of those, and there's more detail that we'll get to related to these, but in the bullet points here, the second to the last and the last bullet point were added. That being under risk factors, the potential for the delay in the repayment of CEDA's investment if mortgage rate escalates. And we have taken a very specific look at that, and there was a request for us to do some more stress testing of this entire model based upon a higher level of interest rate. And so we actually looked at the history of interest rates over the last 50 years, and you'll find attached as a final page of this report, a history of what 30-year mortgage rates have done over the last 50-year period. What we found is that the average on a 30-year basis was just under 6%. And so we stress tested, we ran an analysis stress testing our model at 6% to see what the effect would be. And that's included as an additional exhibit now in the report. The other one that was added here is a fluctuation on factors affecting the assumptions, various factors being cost, so on and so forth. And so we detailed what those were so that they were clear, and again, made that a part of the risk factors, all of which are detailed in much more specific terms under Exhibit 5 attached in the back part of the report. In the conclusion, one of the things that we did is we added some text here that we thought was might be helpful to the general reader, of course, of this report overall. And again, it was in response to the CEDA's discussion last time about wanting to get closer to understanding what could happen under quote unquote worst case scenario in terms of financial consequences. And so I'm going to take just a second to kind of to walk you through this segment because it attempts to address that that idea. And I just talked about the fact that we looked at the history of interest rates over the 50-year period. We ran the stress test. And even though we run a stress test at 6%, we point out the fact that a true worst case scenario could be an interest rate environment in the double-digit numbers, which we actually had that occurred. It's shown on the chart in the back. That was something that did occur in the early 80s in this country, and lasted for a period of 3 to 4 years. Even under that, we believe that there's still a strong argument that can be made that there are benefits to this program and positive options to consider under such a scenario. And we kind of bullet point what those thoughts would be at that point in time. Even if you get into that situation and have created this program, the city would have created the property, a property with substantial ongoing value, which at some point would become fully taxable upon the resale and become part of the overall tax base. The city would have made it possible for families between 80 and 100% of the county median to be involved, to have quality, affordable housing that doesn't exceed 30% of their income, essentially for the life of the program. And providing that kind of housing, the city becomes an even more attractive place for existing and future employers seeking long-term stable employees. We know that rates will go up and down. They have, that's happened. During those periods of time, there are other products that are available to property owners, such as adjustable rate mortgages and other short-term financing that could temporarily enable the tenant to purchase when rates abate. And then under the true worst case scenario, if rates go up and they never come back down within that 30-year time frame, the city would still pay the mortgage based upon the cash flows of the project. They would own the project, but at that point, they would be in a position to sell the units back to the tenants at whatever price they wanted to at that particular point in time. So I think there are still some bases for definite benefits to the community to consider the program, and we thought we'd enumerate that as part of the quote worst case understanding of the situation. A couple of charts here we just added and filled in detail. This is the comparison of various examples that we had in there. And then we talked about the distribution of equity at the end of the day and how that would look for each one of these. These were to be determined as indicated in this chart in the original report. But as a result of the discussion at the last committee meeting, this is one of the open policy questions. The consensus was to provide the tenant / homeowner with the equity that would be necessary for their 20% down payment at takeout, which is the top number here. And then the balance of that to get them to the 30% of their income level would be an amount subject to repayment when they eventually sold the house again, or at 30 years, whichever came sooner. That repayment is money that comes back then to the CDA for purposes of refreshing and reinvesting in this program. These are this is just a summary sheet with the details of our 80% scenario here that we had shown, and these changes that occurred, Steve had just explained to you in a separate section of the report. Okay, here, Steve, I'm going to ask you to cover this slide. This is the one that's more of a summary of our sources and uses in a way that is intended to provide a little better understanding of where the money's coming from and where it's going.
Sure, thanks, Mike. As you recall, last time when we talked with CETA, there was this question about, well, where's the equity coming from? What does that mean? And so we developed this slide as an attempt to explain better where that equity is coming from and how it's being used. So as you look at this, and remember, this is for the 80%er. There's a separate one for a 90%er, a separate one for 100% of adjusted gross income. In this case, the 80% person, based on the numbers and as we projected in the 10th year, would buy the unit. And the question becomes, well, what does that mean? Who gets what, and where does it go, and how does it come back to the endowment fund? And so as you look at this, as we talked last time, we've projected a 2% increase in home values over that 10-year period. So we started out at $330,000 for construction. Now we're at $370,000, which we believe is in our model is the projected market value. So that's the value of the home that's being bought then by the individual In the 10th year, that's at 80% of adjusted gross income. The greatest, longest period of time in the model, remember the 100%ers are at the 4-year period there. So what's necessary to buy that home? Well, first of all, CETA has a loan outstanding, and the loan on that existing unit then would be projected to be $158,000. That's being paid off as time goes on. So that's the outstanding value in the 10th year. That provides us then with $212,000, which would be then, in a sense, program equity that would be available. In addition to that, because the individual tenant is paying 30% of their income in this particular case, there's some additional dollars that are going into a reserve fund, will be used in that 10th year as equity towards the down payment. And so the monthly rents are a little bit less than what they can afford in the 30%. So there's an additional $30,000. So there's a total of $242,000 of equity at that time for distribution. So where does the $242,000 go? Well, in our model, the assumption has been made that the individual tenant would rent until they could buy the unit, which would the determining factor be when is 20% available for down payment. The 20% available for down payment is the conventional financing. We have not projected what it would mean for programs that would be a first-time home buyer. In the discussions that we've had with the 3 different banks, they thought that there were various programs out there that they were going to get back to us to talk about that would not require a 20% downstroke, but something less than that, which would accelerate or push up that 10-year period to something sooner. But we've not modeled that because we haven't gotten the information back from the bank, but that option still exists out there. So we've assumed conservatively that we're doing conventional financing, so the homeowner needs the 20%. Mike, on that previous chart, just identified on Exhibit 1, the equity, the 74,192, that's where you see that number. And in order to keep the homeowner's payment then at 30% of their income, there's additional cash of $76,000 that's necessary to buy down that mortgage. So the combination of property taxes, utilities, and the mortgage end up being at 30% of their income. That's the additional $76,000. That's also the additional $76,000 that's due back to CETA based on your decision. When the unit is sold by them for a second, when they sold the original unit, when they sell the unit, or when they pay their mortgage, that 76 comes back to CETA. CETA then would be repaid the $82,000. That would be part of the TIF money that was advanced. As you recall, we had the $820,000 that was advanced. We have 10 units. This is the $82,000 that's paid back. And in addition to that, there's an additional $10,000 that comes back into the fund. So the 82 and the 10 come back into the endowment fund and can be used for another housing project. So that attempts to help clarify where does the money go and what do we mean when we say equity? So Mike, anything else to add?
Oh, thank you, Steve. So moving on through, the report has details here that, again, are consistent with what we talked about before, but we added charts. This next particular chart is the same 80% analysis. We're talking about 80%, we're talking about families with 80% of the county's median income. And again, to make clear what that is, median income in Dane County right now is about $92,000. 80% of that is around $74,000. If you've got a 3-person household and you break that down to two people working and they were making the same money, that'd amount to just under $18 an hour. $17 and change is what their incomes would be at the 80% level. So it is definitely targeting a population that has some limited means. And then this chart is the same analysis that we've done for that particular segment. We've done others for 90 and 100% of median. But the difference one is indicated at the top. This one is a stress test where we stressed the interest rate. And we use this is where we use the 6% factor. And that's shown here on the chart at 6. Under our previous report, this same table was run at 4% as an assumed takeout cost of the mortgage. So this one is run at 6%. And the results flow through the chart in terms of the consequences of raising the interest rate to 6%. The most significant one is that it put, instead of a 10-year, instead of it being possible for this particular family to refinance and effectively convert to conventional financing at the end of 10 years, this would move it to a 14-year scenario for this particular family. They would still come out of it with very significant benefits. In fact, their equity would increase from the initial 74,000 in terms of the 20% down, it would move up to 77. And then, but to get them to still maintaining only 30% of their income for housing, instead of 76,000, we would need to apply 129,000 a year. Because of the appreciation in the property, that is still possible, but it takes us 14 years to get there instead of 10. And at the end of the day, we end up with benefits, still benefits to the tenant and to the city. They end up with a home at that point then that's worth $385,000. Their net retained equity is $77,000, and they're still only paying 30% of their income for housing. From the city's perspective, the money that was over and above the 20% comes back to the city. That's that 129,000. And if that were applied to all 10 units, CEDA would actually be getting back about 2.2 million here at the end of the day that could be applied to the construction or financing of another program. Again, it's taking longer than we would have hoped, but it is still feasible at that point in time under that 6% stress scenario. So you wanted to see it, and that's what it looks like based on the runs. This next chart is just the same stress test, but cash flowed out over the full period of time. This is the table that showed the annual income and then the monthly income broken down year by year. This is where I said what the median family income for the county is $92,000, and 80% of that is $74,240. 30% of that number is the $22,272. So that's the maximum amount per year they should be spending on housing. And when you take out all the other costs of housing, the condo fee, the payment in lieu of taxes, the insurance, the management fee, the utilities, that leaves an amount available for the mortgage of $12,000 on a monthly basis. That's $1,051, and the mortgage at 6% under this scenario would be $927. So it still leaves a little residual that's available and does build, but it takes us again to get out here to the 14th year to make that conversion if we can't get a better rate than 6%. So that was the impact of that. Again, these benefits are, you've seen that all before. All these other charts are the same. I'm now at Exhibit 4, and this is the open policy questions that are detailed. As I said before, the questions that you had were all addressed by the committee and resolved here. The one question that I mentioned before was the land lease scenario here, where at your meeting of August 26th, there were a couple of members that wanted further examination of the land lease concept. the consensus of the committee overall was not to include it as part of this initial program, but with the understanding that there would be proposals to examine it further. And so that's been provided, and that if approved for review next year as part of the budgeting process would be examined as well. The risk factors, and this is kind of wraps the thing up here, but here's where the most significant, this is the most significant reflection of your input from the last meeting. And this discusses in great detail this question about the potential for repayment and the moving of the interest rate up. And we kind of talked about that. I won't go through that all again, but I will just quickly pan down here to the last page of the report, which is this this chart. This is the one that is the history of interest rates for 30 years of amortization of mortgage. Steve actually was our member, the member of our vast company that pulled this chart together. So Steve, would you like to talk about this chart for a second?
Sure. What we wanted to do is provide some context in terms of where interest rates have been. And as you'll see, we've reflected on the chart then the rates that were the high and low for that year and the average for each individual year. And in the far right-hand side, what we did then is take the average for 10, 20, and 30 years, 40 and 50, and you can see then the respective average. So for the last 10 years, the average rate has been 3.95. You'll see it's up and down, but that's the average for 10. For 20, it's 4.96, and for 30, it's 5.94. And 6% is the number that we chose based on the last 30 years. Clearly, 40-year and the 50-year average is higher than that. But as been pointed out, we've also looked at that from a worst-case situation. So we thought this context would be helpful to include within the report.
So the dialogue and the discussion that we included here is all, you know, part of that attempt to be responsive to CETA's discussion at the last meeting. These additional factors we talked about in detail. We talked about this in the report, but it was felt that we should enumerate this as well. So we ticked them off. In order to make projections of feasibility, we had to make assumptions on a number of things, of course, in this. So we're just disclosing what some of those variables are that are subject to fluctuation, and any one of which can have an impact on our numbers. So obviously, this suggests that as we approach and get closer to financing, all these have to be freshened up on a constant and ongoing basis to validate the feasibility of any program. And that these are the things that you all are very familiar with: the building material costs, the labor costs, our assumptions on inflation and unit appreciation, assumptions on growth in tenant income, assumption on interest rates, and the costs of the assumption on costs of utilities, management fees, taxes, and insurance. Those are the big metrics that go into the analysis that can be subject to change and are not subject to direct control. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that's kind of a quick overview, but a fairly specific overview of our attempt to be responsive to what came out of the last committee meeting, and we hope we've hit the mark.
All right, thank you. So I would open it up to other committee members if there are any questions or comments on the proposed plan and the tax resolution. My video is not working right. I might just have to pipe in because I can't quite be raising their hands.
I have some questions.
Yep, go ahead.
So first I want to make a comment. I am looking in the package. There is a slideshow that they have different amount of, for the construction of the 10 units, it has $3,324,000 million, I said. But here we are talking about the 10 units workforce housing, it will be $3.7 million. So those slideshow are old. Did you make any changes to those numbers in the slideshow, in the presentation, in the package?
Let me take a look.
Yeah,
That one was a comment.
Yeah, I'm thinking, Mike, maybe confirm, I'm thinking that the 3.3 was the construction value in year 1, and the 3.7 is the value in year 10 after the 2% inflation.
Okay, so we are talking about two different.
Yeah.
One is the unit, the cost of the unit, and the other one are the resale.
Yes.
Oh,
Yep.
okay. So, okay, 1 second. What is the first one that you talk about the numbers?
If you're on, are you on the slide presentation, Julia?
Yes, and I want to be sure that those numbers are, yeah. Okay, so the one in the, there is a slide number 5, okay? So those
Okay.
numbers are correct, those are the unit, okay,
Yes.
okay. So, you know, I am still, you know, as I mentioned in the meeting before, okay, you know, I am still in shock when we talk about workforce housing and we're talking about $320,000. You know, my expectation were that, you know, I understand what happened, okay, with the construction cost increase, you know, the current trend in the housing market, you know, all of that stuff. You know, I would like to see, I don't know, like from, if I am a prospective buyer that I want to be part of this housing pilot, you know, I would like to see if there is something like some number for me, you know what I mean? Like, is most of these numbers are for us, for CEDA, for the city, you know, for the common council to vote about, you know, this project. But if kind of like I'm missing is I am the perfect prospect client, buyer, you know, how should I read those numbers? What, you know, how do, you know what I mean? I
Yes.
think it's missing that piece of information for, you know.
Well, I think your perspective as a if you're looking at it as a prospective property owner,
Mm-hmm.
You're going to want to know what's the cost of my unit.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than, so for purposes of presenting it to a prospective tenant, the city and the management company that would be discussing this with that tenant will clearly not focus on the overall project cost, but they'll focus on the specific numbers for that unit that they'd be looking to buy. Probably the easiest place to see that in the documents that we have presented is in the sources and uses page, where we have it broken down on a cost per unit basis. That's, let me go to that slide that I'm, or the page that I would think would be easiest to talk about that from. So here,
Okay.
we'd probably produce a document that would, for the tenant.
Okay.
We would be focused on this column over here. This is the cost per unit. So when it gets down to it, here's my overall cost of what it takes to put up my unit is $332,000 here. And where's that money going? It's you know, I'm paying out of that $32,000 of it is just the land cost, there's 268,000 of it that's going for the building construction. And then we've got professional service fees of 9,000 and financing costs incorporated in there, 11,000, and some other fees. When you add it all together, you end up with the 332,000. But clearly, for purposes of marketing it to the individual, as with any real estate transaction, it's got to be specific to their unit. We would be looking at combining that with the product that they would be seeking to purchase, and of course we get to looking at that when we get more specific into units design and the type of product it is. Once the city arrives at a design for a project, and these are just all examples that we included that have about the square footage that we arrived at, the minimum 1,400 square feet product. And these are several design examples of layouts that could be considered for application in the community. These were taken from various projects that we found that have the attributes in terms of number of bedrooms, bathrooms, garage and storage space that all came out of the desired footprint of a project in the survey that was conducted. So I think we would envision the development of a brochure, if you will, as part of the marketing of this project, if it gets to that point, that would lay out the specifics of cost and what are you getting for that, along with the details of the program and how it would work for the tenant.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask another follow-up question?
Yes.
Sure.
So what is your average square feet price for the construction of this condo?
Steve?
165 is what we've used as the main cost per square foot. There's some area that we've used a little bit less than that, but overall it's in that range. Now, as we mentioned, that's based on what we believe to be current estimates. We've tried to check that number with the builders as best we can. And I think we're in the ballpark. I think the next step, should this proceed, and that's the consideration that you're taking today, is if this were to proceed to the next phase, our objective is to get a unit that's constructed or development constructed as at little cost, as low a cost as possible. And in order to get a better handle on those cost numbers, having site specific would be very helpful to be able to understand the physical terrain and how the unit could be designed, as well as then selecting through an RFP process a builder that could help then figure out, once the design had been developed, what that actual cost is per square foot to see what it looks like. Now, remember, we've done this with the idea that there would be new construction. Clearly, the program is set up so that it could be used for rehabbing, or it could be used if there's a other development out there that's cheaper, that's been constructed before and would be available, and it would fit the parameters of CDA. That certainly would be an option to acquire that at a lower cost. So we're very sensitive to that, but we've tried to do the report reflective of what we actually think the construction costs are based on the 30% increase that we saw since this spring.
Okay, thank you. I have another question. Can I do it?
Go ahead.
I don't know if anyone in the audience, Andy, I have a couple more questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
The other thing that we discussed in the last meeting, and and also when I think about workhouse housing, is about you know, you mentioned in one of the slides all the, you know, all the professional services that, you know, we need to add to the cost of the unit. And also we need to talk about Parkland dedication, fees improvement. And I don't know if you mentioned in this, you know, in this project, but I think there are things that we need to determine if we want this to make, we want this housing pilot to be a workforce housing. I think we need to reconsider some of those professional fees or remove some of the barriers like a park fee or Parkland dedication, because all of that add to the cost of the unit, you know? So that's something like, I don't know if you have considered that in the in this pilot, in the calculation of your number, how we can remove some of those professional fees, and because there are going to be another barriers, you know, to build a more, I would say, affordable housing. So what do you think about how are the other pilots program like this deal with this, all of this professional fee and permit fee and, you know, all of that?
Let me just address that briefly, Julia, in terms of the specifics. This is where all those numbers are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the costs, we have included all of the costs because currently under the ordinances of the community and the expressed desires of the community and the staff, these are the numbers that that would attend to all of those kinds of things if they are included. So until a decision or policy changes occurs that would eliminate one or more of these costs, we felt we needed to account for them in the initial report here. So if in the future the city should decide to provide some relief in any of the fees, let's just take one as a specific one. One of the biggies, of course, is the park improvement, Parkland dedication fee, and that's, in this case, it's $43,330 for the overall project, or $4,333 per unit. So some of the other things that come into play are, you know, we are going to be doing the sprinkling of the units with sprinkler system. That's another $4,200 per unit. Permit fees are $30,000, and so on and so forth. So all those, you know, they add up to the total costs, and if there's adjustments made, it will obviously improve the bottom line. And at such time as any policy changes are made to address those kinds of things, we can always recalibrate this thing, and it would obviously make it work better if we can lower cost. In terms of the professional service fees, sometimes, you know, a number of these fees are driven by a percentage of cost of the overall project. So as you bring the project down in cost, those fees, attendant fees, can go down as well. But there are some legal costs and program monitoring costs and ongoing costs that, if you're going to run the program properly, they can't be completely eliminated. So, you know, you can have some impact on that, but you can't eliminate that, and you still run a program effectively.
No, maybe you misunderstood me. It's like, it's not like we had to eliminate, but how, you know, the city can, you know, in this housing pilot, how some of those costs can be absorbed by, you know, by the city, or, you know, in order to you know, to make this pilot more attractive,
Okay.
if I compare to cost. And I am looking at Park Dedication Fee and city building permit. This is a project that the city is initiating, and the city is going to take the mortgage, and the city is going to be, can we remove those fees? Do we need to charge it back? To make this project more attractive. This is what I am thinking about. This is a workforce housing. It's not like a fair market value houses. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this is what I am thinking in my analysis, what are the things that we can remove from the equation or decrease that is going to make this, this project more attractive. Because to be honest, $320,000 is still, it's still kind of like a high-end housing, project, so that one are my comments. And I have another comment too. Okay, question. Okay. Okay.
Can I chime in here, Julia?
Yeah.
So between what Mike was saying, I looking at these costs too, and some of these cannot go away. I think there's some what I would call softer things in there. If Chad and Mike from the city are willing to see if they can reduce some of those or cut those down, but I'm looking at some of these things in here. You certainly want a safe building. You've got to connect the sewer, you got to connect the water, and you're gonna have some of these special services. So if there's anything else in there the city would consider, I would ask that as a question. But I think what you're raising is a valid point. It's a lot of money, and I think that. But the program looks comprehensive to me. They've responded to what we've said. The key question is this the final one that's ready to go forward up the stage through our city leadership? I just raised the question.
And I think to Mike Kerrigan's point, they have to build a model based on the current conditions, and currently the city requires these fees. But that's a different discussion. If there's interest kind of on the part of the council to go another direction, so be it. But I guess I can't fault them for building their model based on conditions as is.
No, I'm not faulting at all, Andy. I think it's well done. We've had several discussions on this project, and the group has done their homework as we've asked them to go back. So I just was responding to Julia's comments about what's in there and what doesn't need to be in there. That's all.
Yep, agreed.
And I have another question, Andy. That it was asked someone that was looking at this. So in order to start with the project, like, do we need to have the 10 tenants already selected? Or can we start the there are some projects that you need to have the possible tenant or buyer, I don't know how we're gonna call tenants at the beginning, selected and, to start the project, or is something that the city can start and then look for the tenants?
Well, if I can offer some thoughts on that, there's going to need to be a point in time where once the city has made enough of a commitment to wanting to proceed with a program and is serious about advancing this to making it a reality on a particular site, I think the next step in my mind is identifying where this could go, so that we can get more specific numbers on how that's going to look, because we've had to make some broader assumptions here because we don't know exactly where it will be. There may be unique characteristics of any given site that would either add to or subtract from cost. And so my next suggestion to the city is, if you want to move it forward, is to get more serious about identifying where this could be, and ideally even tying up that site with some kind of option or right to purchase, which would probably come at some cost, but would still give you the ability not to have to follow through if something came up. Once that's determined, once we have gone through that next level of assessment with a site-specific analysis, then I think we had also in the report reflected that it would be very helpful to engage a management company at an early stage, really early stage, so that they can work with the CDA and the builder and designer of the project, given the experience that they have with these kinds of products, to make sure that the product is designed in a way that responds to the kinds of needs that tenants would have in this situation. And then, as part of the marketing process for this undertaking, that management company would begin taking names, if you will, to identify prospective tenants. And when it gets serious, they would be asked to advance some or all of their earnest money on the project. But those details will come, I think, as we approach fleshing out the management engagement on the process, because in our conversations with the management people, in our diligence on this report, we found that there are people in your community that have a vast amount of experience with this type of a thing, with this product, and this type of product. And I think engaging those kinds of people at an early stage would clearly be a secret, be part of the secret to success of putting you on the right path.
Mr. Chair? Yeah, I just wanted to add for CETA members, in our 2022 proposed budget, we have the line item to go to that next level of analysis, contingent upon all the bodies and the council approving the program parameters and the resolution here. But then we would get into that site-specific analysis that Mike Harrigan just mentioned.
Great, thank you. Were there any other comments on this resolution?
I can make a final comment.
I thought I said Dan Hardy earlier, but
okay.
Go ahead.
No, I want to say that I all in favor of a housing pilot, and I know that Mike and Steve have worked. I put a lot of thought. You guys understand this market, understand the city dynamic, but I don't like this. I don't like the numbers. You know, I never expected that this project would be so costly, to be honest. You know what I mean? So, so I am still, you know, kind of like, you know, it's out of our control. But I you know what I mean? I have that. For me, 320 is no workforce housing. You know what I mean? I was expecting other number, but I think there is a lot of fee. The construction cost fee that maybe it can be reduced because they are a city fee that maybe we can remove from the equation for sure. And then, as I mentioned in the other meeting, I would like to see the other option with the land trust model. And the other thing that I know that there are plenty of programs out there to help first home buyers, you know, that maybe we should add those links to this, you know, and determine which are, and if they can, the prospect tenants in the future can apply for those. Which one are those? You know, I think we need to move forward with something, at least if we said, you know, because it means that we are thinking outside the box as a city and try to provide affordable housing to this, bring this type of housing to the city. I am all in favor. The only thing that I am still kind of like in shock is the numbers, you know what I mean? And that's all.
So Julia, just a question. What number do you have in mind? Is 330 given all this information that they put together, is what you feel is too high. What number do you have in mind? Do you have one?
Yeah, 285, less than $300,000, 285, something like that.
Okay. Thank you.
What number was that, Julia?
Huh?
What number?
285,000.
So what you're really asking for, well, two comments. Number one, I don't think that you want to skimp on putting the money into the project. Otherwise, you're going to have dilapidated housing right off the bat, and I don't think that's what we're after. Secondly, I think that it's important that this housing, like all housing in the city, bear its respective costs. If the city decides that a park dedication fee of $4,300 is appropriate for my house, that should be $4,300 for every lot that goes in. Now, if the city then wants to come up and say, we're going to give a $50,000 credit to first-time buyers,
Yeah.
so that all homeowners would be treated the same, except in order to give an incentive to the workforce housing, or the city is going to come up with this credit, then I'm all in favor of that. But I wouldn't want to discriminate against the workforce housing people and say, well, because you're workforce housing, we're gonna build for you on a cheap. And that's the impression that I get when you're saying, well, let's do away with let's do away with some of these fees. And so I wouldn't be in favor of that.
No, I think you. First of all, can I respond to him, because I don't think that one was my intention at all. I am not discriminating a workforce housing about quality. Okay, so that one is, please take it out of context. My concept, my interpretation is how, if the city is, this is workforce housing, and there is a lot of different rules when people, when they're building workforce or affordable housing, there are other credit mechanisms to make this construction, more affordable. It doesn't mean it has to be reducing the quality of the construction. What I am saying is there are some fees here that the city has control that maybe we can, reduce or remove, because if we want to make this 10 units, more affordable to build, because Parkland Dedication Fee or city building permit, that one doesn't have to do anything with the quality of the construction, because we are going to do we are going to issue permit, but maybe we should use it at reduced price or a reduced fee. You know what I mean? This is what I'm trying to say. So I am not talking about quality at all. I am trying to think how we can make this housing pilot, more affordable, because $320,000 is, maybe for me, it's not affordable. I don't know. That's it. My intention was that maybe when we start with this pilot program, it wasn't to see the high number, you know what I mean? That's all.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
I have a question.
Oh, sorry, go.
So regardless of the cost of the house, the expectation is that the homeowner will be paying 30% of their annual income. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we have the resolution before us. Just one last call for any other questions or comments. Okay. Voting on the motion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed signify by saying nay. The ayes have it and the resolution is adopted. I do want to take a chance just to thank the two of you for all of your work on this. Obviously, this isn't the end of the process, just a long way. But again, thank you for all your workation and coming to all of these early meetings with us.
Thanks, Mike and Steve.
Pleasure working with the city and specifically CEDA. I think clearly everyone has an overriding desire to make a difference in this kind of area. And hopefully this is something that's will be unique to your community in this case, tailored, I mean, in a way that is feasible. Right now, we believe it is under the terms and conditions that we've outlined. So we look forward if the council chooses to go ahead and in the next step.
Great, thank you. Item number 6B is resolution R-148-21, a resolution to approve a contract for services for North Fish Hatchery Road Hub Phase 1, north side of Traceway Drive, final design.
I'll move.
I'll second.
We have a motion. Okay, we have a motion and a second. I believe Scott Indle is here to discuss this item.
We've got Wade and Scott here for this agenda item.
Morning, CEDA. Yeah, we can certainly provide
Okay, the information was in your packet. For me, this has probably caused your computer to download this item, but I'll turn it over to you guys.
I didn't catch all of it, Andy, but would you like me to provide an overview and intro to the resolution?
Yes.
Yeah, again, good morning, CEDA. Thanks for having us. Wade Thompson, I think you all know me fairly well. Scott Endel, our Parks Director, is here as well today. So yeah, in terms of the hub project, I would say the rubber is hitting the road. We're ready to do final design, which means construction level documents for the hub project. Again, I think this committee is probably more familiar with the hub concept than most. You guys gave us funds probably 2 or 3 years ago to start our planning for the hub, $30,000. So you guys were really, primary movers and shakers in getting this thing to happen. So again, we had the hub concept laid out, a phase 1 and a phase 2. Phase 1 is what we're talking about today, north side of Traceway Drive. I categorize it as enhanced park space. Lots of stuff going on on that north side. So again, today the idea would be to approve to recommend approval of a contract for phase 1 final design. Just in terms of process, we did put out an RFP early this year, got 5 proposals, interviewed 3 consultants, selected 1 as a recommended consultant. That consultant was the one that did our concept plan months ago, so we have a lot of comfort with them. Similarly, their bid was competitive, and they also really understood big picture what the H&I is all about. We have been to Parks Commission as well as Public Works to get recommendations of approval. Those have taken place. So this is our last committee to get a recommendation, hopefully of approval, and then it will go to council next week. And then hopefully we'll get approval there and then start that final design. So with that, I can certainly take any questions or comments the committee might have. And Scott, if you have additional comments, please feel free to provide.
Wade, this is Mark. I just have a question as this goes forward and it goes back to being I'm all for this, and whatever I can do to help, I will do this. But I'm raising the point that when you build it, you still got to run it. And I think that what we're seeing here is the building phase. And there's been a lot of discussion around that. But I want to know, as it gets built, who's going to control it, who's going to build it, who's going to ensure it's safe up there. I mean, I've had this discussion with several members, both in City Hall as well as of citizens around the city. And I don't want to take time from your motion today because I think it needs to go forward. But I really think that needs to get going to be able to develop this, because I'm not seeing or hearing it. And that's just a comment.
Yep. No, Mark, that is an idea we've been talking about since day one. You know, again, at the core, this is a park space. It's not a full-on community center, so it's going to be, but it's different than most of our park spaces. So Scott and I have been talking from day one about it's not just building it, it's managing and maintaining it, and that will take a city investment. Scott and I have ballpark numbers on what that looks like. As of right now, the thought would be to get that thing constructed by late next year, and then come 2023 or even late 2022, have some operating management costs. And we have ideas on what that will cost and what that will look like in terms of staff resources. Similarly, I think we're also going to really, pound the pavement in terms of third-party partners. MSCR, Leopold School, basically, the idea of getting eyes on that property 24/7, whether it's city staff or city partners. So completely valid concern, and one that staff has been thinking about again since I would say day one. And as we move towards finalizing construction, we will have a management scenario and operational scenario put in place, or at least recommended, and then obviously decision makers will make decisions on how that'll pan out.
All right. Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, voting on the motion, all those in favor say by saying aye.
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 Those opposed signify by saying nay. The resolution is recommended for adoption. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, you guys. Thank you. Thanks.
Item 6C is ordinance 2021-0-14, creating Chapter 6, Article 5, Division 6, Section 557 of the Fitchburg General Code of Ordinances establishing a Healthy Neighborhoods Advisory Committee.
And Mr. Chair, Wade is going to take us through this one too for H&I.
Okay, we could we actually need a motion in a second first, so we can get discussion going.
So moved.
Echo.
Okay, Mark and Julia. Okay, if you want to go over the change in status from ad hoc to the permanent committee, and I'll turn it over to Wade.
Yeah, and again, I think this committee is really familiar with the H&I. Kind of started with a few pieces. We had a grant program. We had a few, park projects we were talking about. We had our neighborhood navigator program, but eventually we did kind of put it into a more cohesive strategy and developed a strategic plan for the initiative that the city adopted in March of 2019. So part of that H&I kind of birth was creation of a committee specifically to review the grant program. And it was actually an ad hoc committee, which basically means a temporary committee for a specific purpose. As the H&I has evolved, with things like the hub that we just talked about, I think there's an interest in the city in making that committee broader in terms of covering all aspects of the H&I, as well as moving it from an ad hoc to a permanent standing committee, just like CETA. So that was kind of the directive. Staff did talk with our H&I grant review committee about that. They had some recommendations on how that committee could go from ad hoc to standing. I presented those those concepts to our mayor and our legal team, or our legal. They came up with a similar proposal, which you see in front of you today. So certainly I can answer any questions on process or the resolution that you, or the ordinance that you see in front of you here today.
Julia?
Yeah, so I want to make a comment that it's not similar, it's similar, but when we, the Healthy Neighborhood, committee review, we talk about this, we discuss the composition. We kept the CEDA representative in the committee. In the proposal that is in front of you, the CEDA rep is out. We also discussed in the Healthy Neighborhood that we need to think forward about next year with the town of Madison annexation. We need to have another representative from the Southdale neighborhood. And here is in the proposal in front of you that is not mentioned. I disagree with the proposal that is presented to you today because that one was not the recommendation that the Healthy Neighborhood Initiative proposed. There are some changes. So, and I would like to, I think that to have a rep from CEDA in that committee is critical because CEDA is community and economic development. This is what I stand for. Healthy Neighborhood Initiative was kind of like a board under CEDA, and it's like a subcommittee of CEDA. Eventually, this is how it started, but I think it should be a connection because this is what CEDA does. We talk about community, how to improve the community, how to improve the quality of life in our community. So I would say that to keep that rep in the community will be important.
So I guess question back to then Julia, I guess to still see this as being a member committee. So the way it's in the ordinance would be a 7-member committee, 1 older person, 3 residents of the city, and then 3 residents that reside in or work in a professional capacity to address socioeconomic issues. I guess where would you see the CEDA person? Would it just be 2 residents of the city and 1 representative of CEDA? Or I'm just trying to figure out how to best implement what you're looking at.
I think we need to, we have the current format is we have an elder person, a CEDA rep, and then we have 3 representatives from the 3 current Healthy Neighborhood, areas, okay? So this is what is the current, composition of the team. So the idea is to, to continue with that composition and add, another neighborhood, the Southdale, that is going to be part of the town of Madison next year, and maybe how we can incorporate and working with that, before the annexation. And then, we need to have an odd number, in a committee. This one is going to be a separate committee because it's going to be, but it was created under a subcommittee of CEDA, but, but now it's going to be that link with CEDA. They're still working together, and there are plenty of committees currently that they have member in others, representative in other committees. So it's no. So this is what I say. I think we need to continue with the link and the relationship with CEDA. And this is what I say. And we look for an odd number. And then, my recommendation is to bring what Healthy Neighborhood Initiative recommended, but then it was changed.
So I guess I'm trying to figure out based on how the ordinance is written as presented before us to what changes would need to be made to that to get to what a healthy neighborhood the group looking at.
Mr. Chair.
Wait, do you have your original?
Yeah, I can share that. Hold on. And I can summarize what H&I committee proposed, Julia, if that works.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically, Andy, to your point, I think, so this is kind of the proposed personnel is kind of the gist of, I think, what's being discussed here. So I think the current ordinance, again, has 7 members, one alder, 3 general city residents, and then 3 reps from the neighborhoods. What the H&I committee, I think the difference is would be 4 reps from the neighborhoods to include Southdale, a CETA member, and then an at-large city member. So I think the gist of it is where the current ordinance says kind of 3 general city residents, that would go to a CETA rep, a neighborhood rep, and then that third person would still be the at-large city resident. Does that make sense?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yep, just one idea that you could do, since CETA by state statute, we're required to have 2 alders serving on CETA. So could the alder serving on the H&I, could there be reference that the alder be one of the CETA alder reps? So you get kind of a 2-for-1, so you don't have to add a person there. And then maybe you could take, instead of having 3 of the citizen reps there, that becomes 2, and then you have 4 of the H&I neighborhood reps to kind of keep it at 7. But if you did one of the CETA alders, you could do a 2-for-1 there.
Yeah.
I don't, okay.
No, go ahead.
I don't know, it's gonna be, if we ask the CETA alder to be also, I don't know, we are putting too much on one alder that that person had to be in 2 committees at the same time. You know what I mean? Instead, if we keep a CETA rep, it could be someone that maybe, is more interested in working in that committee or have more, experience in those areas, and, I don't know, make more flexible, give more flexibility to the committee. I don't know.
Yeah, actually, I agree with Julia's comment that certainly it could be the alder representative, but I don't know that we want to limit ourselves to, it has to be one of the 2 alders.
Andy,
so
and Julia,
I guess at this point, really, go ahead, Mark.
No, I was just going to say, I think getting it designed to leave that flexibility is important. We don't have to decide. We want to keep this moving forward, but we don't want to leave anybody or anything out. I think this thing's going to spin off into other things down the road too, because again, I'm someone who worked in operations my whole career, and you got to get it going, and then you're going to have to operate. And there's going to have to be some kind of oversight group as that moves forward. So I think there's plenty of room to do things in this, but get the right people on the table is what I would advocate.
So I guess to the actual at hand, what we currently have for us is the ordinance that was in our packet, which has the 7 committee members, as we've discussed, how those are broken out. So yes, if there's a desire by CETA to have a different makeup of that, we would need a motion to that effect to propose an alternative.
Yeah, we need to amend that if we want to do that. So I am
Correct.
proposing an
Yes,
amendment.
someone would need a motion to amend.
Yeah, I am proposing an amendment to this. The proposed resolution in front of us, and is to keep the CEDA rep, add, another, add the fourth neighborhood rep, and then we need another resident, a large member.
Okay, so see if I can summarize this. So we would be keeping just looking at the ordinance under B composition.
Mm-hmm.
We would be keeping the one alderperson.
Mm-hmm.
We would then be adding one representative, CEDA. Instead of saying 3 residents of the city, we would say 1 resident of the city. And then instead of 3 residents of the city that either reside in or work in a professional capacity to address socioeconomic issues, the priority neighborhoods identified in the Healthy Neighborhoods and Strategic Plan, that number would go 3 to 4.
Yeah.
Am I summarizing your proposed amendment correctly?
Yes, I will. My recommendation is to bring forward the recommendation that the Healthy Neighborhood Committee discussed.
Okay. So I think that has been put forward as a motion to amend the ordinance by Julia. Is there a second to that motion?
I'd second that, Andy.
Okay, it's been seconded by Mark. Is there any discussion on Julia's amendment to modify the composition? So still retaining 7 members, but adding the CEDA rep, reducing the at-large city membership from 3 to 1, and increasing the neighborhood representatives from 3 to 4. I'm sorry for the pauses. I've got kind of a delay on my end, so trying to leave time for people. Seeing no further discussion on the proposed amendment, voting on the amendment, all those in favor signify saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Okay, the amendment is recommended for adoption. We're now back on the main motion, which is consideration of ordinance 2021-0-14 as amended. Any further discussion on the amended ordinance? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed, nay. Okay, that ordinance is recommended for adoption. Right. Thank you, Wade.
Thanks, Wade.
Item number 7, hotel room tax report considerations.
We do not have
anything.
We do not have any considerations, and Misty will have a report for us next month.
Okay, great, thank you. Then item number 8 is Economic Development Director and Committee Member Reports. We actually ended up not having this at our August meeting due to some considerations, so I'm anticipating Mike probably has quite a bit to go over, so I will turn it over.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of updates for you. We had the ribbon cutting for the new pickleball courts at Mckee Farms Park. That was on Tuesday of this week, so a lot of people attended, a lot of interest in the pickleball courts over there. Nice amenity to have in Fitchburg. Tonight there's a Chamber Fitchburg Biz Outdoors event at 4 to 6 p.m. at Benvenuto's. So if you haven't signed up for that, look for the link and just sign up and join the chamber networking event tonight. Some updates from the Plan Commission meeting on Tuesday night. There's a gymnastics entity that's looking to take the former Acre Flooring and most recently used as the iCombat building. So there will be a gymnastics business that'll be moving into that building in the Fitchburg Business Park. Little John's, who took over the former A1 Furniture along Verona Road, is coming forward with both interior and exterior renovations. So you'll be seeing some facade renovations on that building. Terra Vesa received approval for their final plat for the second edition, which is good because we've got a healthy pipeline of single-family construction, so we want to make sure that we keep the inventory of lots available and in the pipeline and going forward. Andev Development, which is a senior housing group that's been working on lots 53 and 54 on the west side of Mckee Farms Park, received their PDD GIP approval for assisted living and memory care. And then the O'Brien family received approval for their preliminary plat at Seminole Highway and Lacey Road, and that's important because that will allow them to sell off the parcel to Edgewood College. And then we're working collectively as a staff team with Edgewood College. They'll start now to do some of their informal work with hosting a neighborhood meeting to start to share their concepts for their athletic complex that they're looking to do there at Lacey and Seminole Highway. Fred DeVillers is coming forward with development on the north side of East Sherrill Parkway in the Swan Creek neighborhood. There would be 54 units there, 5 duplexes, 36 townhomes, and then 8 CBRF units. Payne and Dolan, we've been working with them. This is off of Cottonwood Drive in the Fitchburg Commerce Park. General Beverage actually needs more space for warehouse and distribution. And so Payne and Dolan is bringing forward a comprehensive development plan to be able to split off about a 7-acre lot for General Beverage to then come forward with a warehouse and distribution facility. We've got Fahey South starting to come forward. They've got their comprehensive development plan. Will be on the next Plan Commission agenda. And then we've got Viridian, which will be working with Fahey South on deck for a pre-application meeting for PDD zoning for single-family and 2-family lots in the Fahey South subdivision. We're continuing to work with Fitchburg Minerals and Payne and Dolan for the subdivision, which would be at the corner of Fitcherona Road and Lacey Road. So that will be on the next Plan Commission agenda. That's for single-family lots on the south side of Lacey Road at Fitcherona. And then the Fosside property, which is the clean fill site between Highway 14 and MM. We're working with Royal Capital on that development for mixed use. They're looking at the combination of multifamily, townhomes, senior units, and some commercial space. So they will be on the October Plan Commission agenda for their pre-application meeting for that one. And then we've got, we're continuing to work with the Inventure Capital people who developed the Terrace Point project on the former juice plant. That's open, 100% leased up. They're having a grand opening on Friday, October 15th, but they're looking to do another potential mixed use project, Oshala Drive there by UW Credit Union between Fish Hatchery Road and Index. Approximately 169 multifamily units and about 10,000 square feet of commercial space. So we're hoping that we can keep that project moving forward. City staff team toured the Highline Senior Apartments with Plesco. They're working on some concepts for possibly another project north of Traceway Drive there, so stay tuned for more information on that one. We're in some conversations, very preliminary with Bob Shea regarding his property on the north side of Mckee Road and some potential interested parties over there. And then we've got the staff is working on the Moody's presentation, which will be coming up for our bond rating. That'll be sometime the week of October 18th. And then we'll be doing a presentation as part of the city update for the Fitchburg Chamber Visitor Business Bureau for their Fitchburg Focus on Wednesday, November 3rd. So it'll be the mayor, Chad, and I kind of giving a city update and development update for that group. And I think that kind of covers everything. Any questions? We are getting some calls as far as commercial projects out there, potentially daycare Had a call the other day for somebody inquiring about a hotel site. So it seems like there is development activity even on the commercial side that's starting to generate again as we continue to kind of emerge from the COVID crisis and pandemic here. So I'll keep you posted as we work with some of those parties and entities. That's all I have to report.
Great, thank you. Were there any questions for Mike? No? Okay. Then moving on. Item number 9 is announcements. Are there any announcements? Okay, seeing none. Item number adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and all those opposed, say nay. We are adjourned. See everybody in October, if not sooner.